ओम प्रज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवम् साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिने नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यादि पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Okay, so I will try to explain Shri Govindaraja's analysis of Shri Valmiki Ramayan's cardinal teachings. They appear at the end of between chapter 4 and chapter 5. On the left, I have placed the Sanskrit text in one of the editions, one of the Sanskrit editions that contains Sri Govindaraja's commentary. And on the right, I have placed my rendition of this. So I will read from this and try to explain whatever needs to be explained. As an introduction to chapter 5 of Canto 1 of Valmiki Ramayana, the commentator Sri Govindaraja analyzes the 18 cardinal teachings of the Ramayana that Ramanujacharya had learned from one of his spiritual masters, Shailapurna. No. One thing that you will notice in our edition, the Rupa Raghunath Vani edition of Sri Valmiki Ramayana, I have presented footnotes extensively. This is so that the statements of the authorities are preserved within the inline text. And my understanding of it is what is presented in footnotes. I wanted to make it very distinct. Those who accept Vedic authority accept the principle of ekavakyata and samanvaya. Ekavakyata means that all the different scriptures, they are actually speaking, they are all speaking in a harmonious manner. And samanvaya means harmony. That is the principle that all Vedic scriptures harmoniously point towards the same conclusion. Lord Krishna explains this in the Gita 15.15 by saying, Vedeshya sarvai rahameva vedyaha. I alone am the subject matter to be known, understood, and realized by all the Vedas. Since Ramayana is greatly respected by Vyasadeva in his writings, it is naturally understood that Valmiki cannot have a purpose different from Vyasa's purpose, which is to clarify the teachings of the Vedanta, which is also clarified in the Bhagavad Gita. Vedanta generally refers to the Upanishads. Vedanta Sutra refers to the ultimate conclusion of the Upanishads. Sometimes Vedanta Sutra is also referred to as Vedanta in the sense of the conclusion of the Vedas. Okay. The Ramayana describes itself as a kavya, a poem. Rhetoricians in India have long recognized that one of the impressive features of kavya is its suggestiveness, the importance of which is clear from rhetorical classics such as Anandavardhana's Dvanyaloka, suggestiveness illuminated. Indeed, Srila Rupa Goswami, Srila Kavi Karnapur, and Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan have accepted the critical importance of suggestiveness in good poetry in their writings. Srila Rupa Goswami's Stavamala, Srila Kavi Karnapur's Alankara Kaustubha, or Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan's. He also writes about all of this Kavya Kaustubha. These things are important. So is it not reasonable to conclude that the original poet and God-realized sage Valmiki, upon being instructed by Lord Brahma himself to write a poem on Lord Ramachandra, would have extensively used the poetic technique of suggestion instead of directly trumpeting out the spiritual teachings he intends to convey? There is nothing unreasonable in Sri Govindaraja's assertion that these teachings suggested by Valmiki in his Ramayana are factually the cardinal teachings of this great work. There are a number of people who think that Ramayana presents the greatest human, Rama, because throughout Valmiki appears to be speaking like that, even though occasionally he suggests different things. They don't take these suggestions seriously. But because it is a kavya, the suggestions have to be taken seriously. The hints, the suggestions, these assume prime importance while analyzing a poetry. Therefore, Sri Govindaraja is not, it is not that he is giving a Vaishnava twist to the Valmiki Ramayana. He is actually unearthing the tatparya or the purport of the Ramayana, which is suggested far and wide throughout the 7 cantos. The following is an abridged English rendition of this part of this commentary. Sometimes we have quoted complete verses here when the commentator quotes fragments of those verses. We have done so to help the reader better comprehend the context of his discussion. Because this is the most important part of the commentary, we have placed it at the beginning in this edition to orient the readers towards a proper understanding of the great Ramayana of the great sage Valmiki. Preliminary remarks. Idam cha tapaswadhyayetyarabhya sargachatustayam mahat parigraha siddhaye ukta vailakshanytraya pratipadana paratvena prabandha upodhatatvat Sri Ramayanantargatam katha Shariranu prastavana granthavat. The first 4 chapters of this canto establishes the 3 extraordinary features of this literature in order to be respectfully accepted by great souls. See, it is very important that Ramayana be accepted by great souls. Valmiki himself is a great soul and he is writing for great souls. And as we see in Sri Ramayana itself, the book was written and then Lavakusha began to recite it and they received the approval of great souls, great sannyasis, great renounced ascetics. It is for them it is written. Just like the Goswamis wrote books for each other, Prabhupada said. Great literature are written by great souls for other great souls. The others are given the opportunity to become great souls. Footnote 3. The 3 extraordinary features of the Ramayana are the extraordinary characteristics of the author of this work, the extraordinary characteristics of the mode of composition of this work, and the extraordinary characteristics of the work itself. These features are pointed out and explained in the commentary to chapters 2, 3, and 4 of Canto 1 of the Ramayana. So this, if you have gone through this portion, then you would understand what this refers to. Thus, these chapters constitute an introduction to the Ramayana containing the essence of this book. Prastavana. It's an introduction. Nanu Ramayana nirmananantara bhavinaha tatha sharirasya asya katham tat urvabhavaha iti chet na anantara bhavitve api trikalajnena maharshina prathamam tan nirmana sambhavat. One might wonder how a sage could describe the extraordinary features of a work that he has not yet written. The answer is that Sri Valmiki is a Trikalagya. He's a great sage, Maharshi. It's a Trikalagya. That is capable of seeing the past, present, and future. Therefore, it is quite possible for him to do so. Therefore, it is possible for him to write about the extraordinary features of the work even before beginning the work, because it's already clear in his mind. He's blessed by Lord Brahma. Valmiki Ramayana is the authorized summary of the Moola Ramayana. The Moola Ramayana itself is Shatakoti Pravistaram. It's a work which extends to 100 crore verses. And we understand from Matsya Purana that these were actually, along with other literature, Pancharatra and others, they were actually manifested by Lord Hayagriva. There's an incarnation of Lord Vishnu named Hayagriva. So that is Moola Ramayana. And this is a summary for human beings. So Sri Valmiki was blessed by Lord Brahma. Therefore, he knows how to present these things. He knows what needs to be stated first, what needs to be stated next. Footnote, the question might arise. Will not an author know his work even before he commits it to pen? Is it necessary to drag a Trikalagya attribute for the author? In response, it should be noted that when ordinary human beings plan to write a book, they have some idea of what they're going to write and then begin writing over time as their ideas develop. They also revise their writing. But even before the great sage Valmiki began to put the 24,000 verse Ramayana into writing, he knew exactly in detail what would come out as the end result. This is not possible for ordinary or even talented human beings. But by the blessings of Lord Brahma, Maharshi Valmiki became Trikalagya and knower of past, present, and future. Even prior to that, he was a rishi. Urdhvaretas tapasyugro niyatashi cha samyami shapanugrahayoh shakta satya sandho bhavet rishi. A rishi is one whose semen flows upward, who fears in observing austere vows, who eats moderately, controls his senses, is able to curse and bless, and adheres firmly to the truth. Devala Rishi, quoted in Srila Sanatana Goswami's commentary on Brihad Bhagavatamrita 2.1.106. Okay. Nanu Atma Prashamsa Paramidam Sargatrayam Katham Rishihi Swayameva Vaktumarhati. Another objection. How is it possible for the sage Valmiki to compose chapters 2 to 4 that glorify himself? Now, in today's world, to glorify oneself is considered cool, acceptable, pleasing also. But in Vedic civilization, it's considered uncivilized. Swayameva sumahatmyam kathyate yanna tat satam sammatam syat. Describing one's own glories is disapproved by spiritual authorities. Tat swamahatmya kathanam satam sammatam na syat swaprashamsat bhuvam mrityuhu ityadyukte. Spiritual authorities disapprove describing one's own glories through statements such as self-praise is as good as death. It is better that the person dies and glorifies himself. Srila Sanatana Goswami's Brihad Bhagavatamrita 2.1.106 and commentary. From the 3rd chapter of the Ramayana, it is clear that the sage Valmiki saw in meditational trance events from the pastimes of Lord Brahma and his associates in vivid detail, even though they don't appear in Narada Muni's brief outline of the Ramayana in the 1st chapter of the Ramayana. The 2nd chapter describes that he was directly blessed by Lord Brahma, who came to his ashrama and instructed him to write the Ramayana. His Ramayana was also very appreciated by other renunciants of his time as being sweet and bona fide, as noted in the 4th chapter. All of this is a description of Valmiki's glory of being the recipient of the special blessings of Narada Muni and Lord Brahma. But he had to write out his glory in order to convince intelligent readers that his huge work is worthy of being studied by them. They should not think it's just some stories. It is not that. This is actually a presentation of the teachings of Prasthanatrayi, the essence of all Vedic knowledge, Vedic philosophy, presented in the format of a kavya. As we will see later on, Sri Ramayana describes Ramlila and is also a part of Ramlila. Hence, it is Lord Ram's eternal message to the conditioned souls. Iti chet, na. The answer to this is that अन्य अपरिज्ञातस्यैतस्य वृत्तान्तस्य प्रेक्षावत् प्रवृत्त्यर्थम् आदौ अवश्यं वक्तव्यत्वात्. Now, this portion. The answer to this is that they recount incidents that otherwise would remain unknown, and the sage was obliged to include them in order to interest the intelligent, generate interest amongst the intelligent to read the Ramayana. Yadva sargatrayam idam kenachit Valmiki Shishyena Ramayanam निर्वृत्ति अनंतरम निर्माय वैभव प्रकटनाय संगमितम यथा याज्ञवल्क्य स्मृत्यादौ तथैव तत्र विज्ञानेश्वरेण व्याख्यातम्. An alternative explanation is a disciple of Sri Valmiki has added these 3 chapters into Ramayana after Ramayana was composed in order to glorify his master Sri Valmiki. And that has been approved by Sri Valmiki and he has conjoined it to his book. Yatha Yagyavalkya Smrityadav, for instance, in books like Yagyavalkya Smriti, Vijnaneshwara, one of the commentators, he also says that the glorification of Yagyavalkya and so on, different things, they've been added by a disciple, but it is accepted as part of the book. If you see like that, even in one of Madhvacharya's writings, if I remember correctly, it's Tattvadhyota. It ends with the glorification of Madhvacharya. It is an essay criticizing Kevaladvaita philosophy, pointing out how it is basically Buddhism disguised as a Vedic philosophy. It ends with the glorification of Madhvacharya. And from Jayatirtha, the classic commentator of several important philosophical writings of Madhvacharya, it is understood that these were actually composed by disciples, but they were added into it. Madhvacharya approved it, so it is always considered part of it. So that also happens. So that possibility is also there. Nanu etasya sargatra, okay. Nanu etasya sargatrayasya Ramayana aditve kushalavabhyam etad gane prathamam kriyamane tau Ramena आदौ एव स्वपुत्रौ इति परिज्ञातौ स्याताम् तथा च तदा एव सीता आनयन आपत्तिः बिम्बादिवोत्थितौ बिम्बो रामदेहात् तथा परौ तौ राजपुत्रौ इत्यादिना हि रामपुत्रत्वम् अनयोः सूच्यते. तस्मात् इदम् असंगतम् इति चेत् न सीतापुत्रत्वादेः अत्र अकथना रामसादृश्यं मात्रस्य राजपुत्रान्तरेष्वपि सम्भवति. Now here another objection can be stated that right in the beginning, in the first 3 sargas, it is noted that Ramayana first of all was sung by Kusha and Lava, and then everybody would get to know that they were actually Ram's own sons. So then, because it's also indicated that there's a verse that Lava and Kusha, when they sang the Ramayana, they were 2 sons of a king. and they appear to have directly come out of Rama's body, like reflections of an object. So it is already indicated that they were Ram's sons. So there is some inconsistency between the first three sargas and the rest, and therefore it will not be part of the Valmiki Ramayana. So if you had to consider an objection like that, the answer to that is it is not clear, it is not stated that they were sons of Sita Devi. There is always a possibility that they could have been born to some other king and still they just resembled Rama. So that objection is also not sustainable. Ramanujacharya, the best of the renunciants, learned from Sri Shailapurna the 18 cardinal teachings of the Ramayana. I will present them as I have learned them from my spiritual master. These two sentences appear in the original at the end of the first cardinal teaching of the Ramayana. We have placed them here to make the subject clearer. There is no reason to doubt the validity of the assertion that Ramanujacharya had learned these teachings from one of his gurus, Shailapurna. The other biographical traditions of the Ramanuja school do say that Sri Ramanuja had learned the import of the Ramayana. This is also not an area of dispute between the two main branches of the Ramanuja Sampradaya, Vadagalai, Tengalai. It is also generally acknowledged that a significant portion of knowledge transmission in the traditions of medieval India was oral in nature, with texts serving more as mnemonic aids, that means aids for memory, rather than as exhaustive descriptions of their thought systems. In fact, the veteran scholar Sudarshan Acharya, an elder contemporary of Vedanta Deshika, gave his monumental sub-commentary on Sri Ramanuja Sri Bhashya called Shruta Prakashika, the sub-commentary that reveals what I have learned from my Guru. So Sri Govindaraja's statement that he understood these 18 teachings of the Ramayana through an oral tradition, starting from Sri Shailapurna and coming through a disciplic succession, is reasonable. So it's not unreasonable to come to this conclusion. Then he begins with a discussion of the 18 points, 18 topics. Ayam cha prabandha Veda upabrahmana rupaha Vedanta artham upabrahmayati. This composition, section 1, this composition, Sri Ramayana, elucidates the Veda. And as such, it also elucidates the Vedanta. In Sri Vaishnavism, Vedanta refers to the Upanishads. Vedanam Antaha, the conclusion of the Vedas. The Veda here itself refers to the 4 Vedas. Shruti. So it is referred to as Vedanta, Trayanta, Shrutiyanta, and so on. It's all Upanishads. Prabhupada refers to the Upanishads as the headlines that you see in news articles. There may be a news article, and then you have headlines. Because sometimes Upanishads are also referred to as Vedashirah, Vedashiras, the head of the Vedas. So Prabhupada explained the headlines of the Vedas, because the headlines explains exactly the core point that you are meant to understand through the article. So the Upanishads are the headlines of the 4 Vedas. So it is Vedanta in that sense. Prayena purva bhagartho dharmashastreena kathyate. Itihasa puranabhyam vedantartha prakashyate iti vachana. This is because there is an authoritative statement. The teachings of Sri Jaimini's Purvamimamsa are mainly stated in the Dharma Shastras. And the teachings of Sri Vyasa's Vedanta Sutra are revealed in the Itihasas and Puranas. Jaimini's Purvamimamsa presents the teachings of the Brahmana, Samhita, and Aranyaka portions of the 4 Vedas. These teachings are elucidated in the Dharma Shastras. Dharma Shastras begin with Manusmriti, Yajnavalkya Smriti, and so on. There are 20 important Dharma Shastras. Vyasadeva's Uttaramimamsa, also known as Vedanta Sutra, presents the teachings of the Upanishad portion of the four Vedas, which are elucidated in the Itihasas and Puranas. The Itihasas are Vyasadeva's Mahabharata and Maharshi Valmiki's Ramayana. The Puranas are 18 in number. This is a reference to the Mahapuranas. There are also 18 Upapuranas. See Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 12, Chapter 7 for more details on the Puranas. The 18 major Puranas are enlisted, along with their common characteristics. Srila Jiva Goswami notes in his Tattva Sandarbha 12, Veda Shabdasya Samprati Dushparatva Dur Adhigamarthatvacha Tad Artha Nirnayakanam Muninam Api Paraspara Vinodha Veda Rupo Vedartha Nirnayakas Che Itihasa Purana Atmakas Shabdeva Vicharaniya. Because the texts of the four Vedas cannot be studied in present times completely, its meaning difficult to be understood, and because even the sages who have described the teachings of the four Vedas contradict each other, one should examine the Veda in the form of the Itihasas and Puranas that accurately describe the import of the four Vedas. This reaffirms the point that the Ramayana as an Itihasa elucidates the teachings of the Veda that contains the Upanishads, which teach Vedanta philosophy. Traditionally, systems of philosophy in India are categorized into those that do accept Vedic authority and those that do not. The former are traditionally enlisted as 6: Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, Purvamimamsa, and Vedanta Sutra, which rationally points out the problems with the concepts exposed by adherents of the first 5 systems of philosophy and systems that do not accept Vedic authority at all, and summarizes and clarifies the teachings of the Upanishads correctly. Strictly speaking, it is not just the Upanishads. The Vedanta Sutra has its scope the entire body of Vedic literature, the portions of Shruti which are not Upanishads, and also Smriti literature. But since most of the followers of the Vedas give great importance to the Upanishads, this kind of statement is made. Sri Vedanta Deshika of the Ramanuja school presents strong arguments to show that Jaimini's Purvamimamsa text was not properly understood by those who claimed to be his followers, and that it has to be studied in tandem with the Vedanta Sutra. Those interested in studying these philosophies can go through Srila Baladev Vidyabhushana's Govinda Bhashya and Siddhanta Ratna with the Sukshma Tika commentary. There's a Sukshma Tika commentary on Govinda Bhashya, and there is one for Siddhanta Ratna also, as well as the commentaries on the Vedanta Sutra by exponents of the 4 Vaishnava Sampradayas.